Today we're going to talk about the X-Men, from the X-Men 97 TV show to trying to get into X-Men, what Marvel expects you to do if you're actually reading the X-Men, and then at the end of all of that, we'll probably get to the problem with X-Men if you hadn't figured it out by the time I get there. Today's episode is brought to you by my hot sauce. This hot sauce is. It's a Green Hatch chili hot sauce that me and my friends made and started selling here on YouTube. YouTube told us that they would have a great shopping division going up soon, make a product. I did. Their shopping division sucks. So check out thishotSauceIs.com down below if you want to support us, and use the code COMICS to buy one, get one free, and get free shipping. We are literally giving away the hot sauce so we can get it in people's homes, and you guys can check it out and see if you like it, and then we can expand upon our hot sauce business. We're giving it away to the first 500 people that go to the website and use the code COMICS, so please consider supporting us in our endeavors to stick it to YouTube. All right, so X-Men 97 just came to its amazing finale, so let's talk about that first. Like I said, we're going to talk about that, then what I decided to do to get fully caught up on the X-Men, and I'll explain that one in a minute, because I want to know, what is Marvel smoking to think that they can do what they're doing and it's going to go on forever? Because it also has gone on forever, but we'll get to that. So let's talk about X-Men 97 to begin with. Now, back in the 90s, I did watch X-Men, but it was in my formative years, meaning I didn't sit down and watch every episode of X-Men. I did catch a lot of it. I knew what was going on, but it was always on at weird times, and I was coming back from school and stuff like that. So when they came out with the X-Men 97 show, I wasn't exactly super on board with it. See, I was a big fan of the Batman the Animated Series because my dad and I watched that one as a kid. He would set aside time so that we could watch Batman, but he didn't care about X-Men. So that was kind of like a me watching it kind of a thing. Same thing with Spider-Man, although I did try harder to watch Spider-Man. But what I'm getting at is X-Men 97, when it came out, I wasn't rushing to go watch it. I was like, it's probably going to be good. I want to check it out. Curious what they're going to do, but I don't need to rush to watch it. It was when we had the moment of, and for the record, I'm going to be spoiling some key moments in the series right here, so if you're not caught up, jump to later in the video, okay? Like, I'll just say it right now. But it was when I started to hear the rumors that a certain X-Men had been killed that I was like, okay, let me go catch up, because that's going to get spoiled very quickly. So I watched it, and I was shocked that they had killed off Gambit when they did in the fall of Genosha. And then watching the show, I loved it. I thought it was great. I have two key complaints or critiques, however you want to look at it. And I even asked Sal and other people that I work with, like, am I forgetting something? Because I don't remember the X-Men show moving this quickly. I remember the show having one-off episodes and then these long, sprawling arcs. And Sal said I'm right by what I remembered. I feel like the show was moving way too quick through way too many big storylines, like Madeline Pryor in Cable, moving super quick through the Sinister angle of the entire thing. We moved super quickly through the fall of Genosha and all these kinds of stuff. We literally had an episode where Madeline Pryor had basically gone crazy, tried to kill the X-Men, was going to go find herself, and I believe it was the next episode where they were like, and now she's on the committee of Genosha. And it's like, when? How? How do you go from murdering to you're now on the committee? So it just felt like it was moving very, very quickly. My other kind of nitpick is mostly voices. They chose to use some returning actors who hadn't aged too much, and then the ones who had aged got new roles so they weren't forgotten about, and then we got new actors to play those roles. But one voice in particular stood out to me, and that was Rogue's. And I know it was the original actress, and she did an amazing job. Just keeping Rogue at the same age and then using that with her aging voice, it felt a little out of place to me, but overall, the performance was good. She still had the emotion. She still made it sound right, but it was noticeable to me, and that was the only other real major nitpick I had. Well, I guess there's a third one, too, and that was the animation. There was an attempt to use computers to recreate the original 90s style of animation, and even up to the ending, it kind of bugged me. It just didn't look right. It didn't feel right. I was able to watch the show. I'm saying it right now, and I enjoyed the show. But certain things, one that really stood out to me was the line work that we used on Magneto's face. Just kind of stood out to me as like, okay, maybe we should have updated the animation a little bit more and not tried to use computers to recreate the older one. But again, these are all nitpicks because that show was incredible. Other than the quick pacing, I loved every moment of it. And it really got me more and more interested in returning to read the X-Men. And there's a reason why I haven't been super hardcore reading X-Men recently, and that has been because of the Krakoa era. Now, for those who are new to the channel, when I was a kid, read DC comic books and Spider-Man. I mean, technically I read Marvel, but I read Spider-Man. That was it. I read Spider-Man, I read Batman, and I read like all the edgy things like Wolverine or Punisher. I would read the Spider-Man 2099. Over on DC, I'd read things like Azrael or, that was all the edgy stuff. I was an edgy kid, okay? So I never really got super deep into comics. One of the comics I never got super deep into was the X-Men because it always felt like it was very intimidating to get into. When we started doing Comicstorian all the way back in 2013, 2014 timeframe, we started with the New 52, and I kind of built a DC-centric audience, which is fine. I do read a lot of DC. So when I tried to read X-Men for the channel, it was very intimidating to get into, and the X-Men were in a weird spot where they were getting kind of bumped down by the MCU because Fox owned the movie. For those who don't know, the Fantastic Four and the X-Men were pretty much given the order of like, no priority, no budget, don't do anything. We can't make movies about them, so don't give them a priority. The Fantastic Four got completely canceled at this point, and that's just because they didn't have a lot of fans. But the X-Men always kept going, and they had always kind of just put a couple books out, and they wouldn't go crazy on the X-Men. When Jonathan Hickman came in and decided to reinvent X-Men comics, create a brand new jumping on point for readers, get everyone on board, we all understand what's going on, that seemed to me to be a good point to jump into the X-Men. And this was like 2019, 2020. So no, X-Men 97 did not make me read X-Men like crazy. But the issue I always had with X-Men comics is that there's way too many. If you're trying to get into the X-Men, Marvel has always treated the X-Men as its own line within Marvel. They do the same thing with like Spider-Man, but Spider-Man will have normally at max 4 books running at the same time. So it's not too expensive to keep up with and you can see what's going on. But the X-Men have interweaving plots. They have drama. There's normally like 7 to 10 books going concurrently when they're going strong and they want to be promoted. They really make it a chore to get into the X-Men. And that's what I want to get into, because while 97 was incredible and I thought it might bolster the X-Men numbers, which is where this discussion is going, I don't think it's going to, because this is where we get back to the original joke of what is Marvel smoking? So I decided that after watching X-Men 97, I want to get caught up on the X-Men. I may or may not make a video for it, and I'll explain what we're doing at that very soon, because there will be a video, but you'll see in a minute. But I was like, okay, where do I start? Because when Krakoa started, which was the latest era of X-Men, which was like 2019, 2020, it was somewhere in there. I don't know off the top of my head. It really doesn't matter. It's been 4 or 5 years of the Krakoa era is what it boils down to. I jumped on with X-Men, X-Force, and Wolverine. Those were kind of like 3 X-Men books. I'm going to read these concurrently. I'm going to be on board with these. I want to see what's going on. It was a problem at times when it came to X-Force or X-Men because they would be interweaving into various events. Hellfire Gala, X of Swords, Inferno. There was another one. And I'm going to get to that in a minute. But Wolverine always kind of stayed off on his own side of the park. He was like, I'm over here, leave me alone, I'm doing Wolverine, which is great. I loved it. So I was like, okay, so I have an idea what's going on leading into Fall of X, but once we got to Fall of X, I've made multiple complaints over on our podcast channel that this is insane that they expect you to read this many books. Okay, and that's what we're going to get into in a minute, because if you're trying to get into X-Men and you really want to know what's going on with X-Men, here's your Fall of X reading order. Now, I would like you to know, Googling Fall of X reading order gives you multiple websites, some of them broken into parts. Fall of X Part 1, Fall of X Part 2, Fall of X Part 3. And this is an event that's only been going on for like 6 months. This is not a year crazy thing. This is like 6 months of Fall of X. To get the full grasp of Fall of X, you would have to read last year's Free Comic Book Day Avengers X-Men. You then read Hellfire Gala, which was their big summer event, okay? You then need to read, and I'm just going to give you the bulk instead of the full, because you got to bounce between these books. I want to put that out there. You do got to bounce between the books to do it properly. But you would have to read X-Force 43 to 50. Keep in mind, you have to know what's also going on in X-Force, which means you probably have to read X-Force, I believe it was 35 is when they did a soft reboot. So to fully grasp it, you would need to read X-Force 35 to 50. You need to read Invincible Iron Man 1 through 18. 1 through 7 tells you how Iron Man is involved with the X-Men and why these Sentinels have been made. 8 through 18 is him dealing with the X-Men in the Fall of X, okay? You then have to read X-Men, normal X-Men, 25 to 35. Again, like X-Force, this is an ongoing book, so you probably, to fully grasp it, need to read 1 through 25, then 25 to 35. We got a spin-off in the middle of this one that you're supposed to read, Miss Marvel, the New Mutant. You really don't need to read that, but it's in the Fall of X because at the Hellfire Gala, Miss Marvel was announced to be a mutant. So how does she deal with that during the Fall of X? That's the Miss Marvel book. You've also got to read the Children of the Vault spin-off. Immortal X-Men is an 18-issue run. 14 through 18 deals with the Fall of X. But to fully grasp what's going on in Immortal X-Men, you're gonna have to read 1 through 13 as well. We then have another book, Realm of X, which is how the magical people like Magic and all of them in another dimension are dealing with the Fall of X, which also runs in line with the Uncanny Avengers book, which is another 5 issues featuring how does Captain America and Deadpool deal with what's going on with the Fall of X. And I will say, while my co-host on my podcast channel absolutely says he hated Uncanny Avengers, that was one of my favorite books in this whole mix because it was like, hey, this happened because of Fall of X, and then it was self-contained. You got to deal with Uncanny Spider-Man 1 through 5. That's the story of Nightcrawler and what Nightcrawler did after the Fall of X Hellfire Gala and how he kept himself hidden from the Sentinels going around trying to kill everyone. There's a story about the Dark X-Men 1 through 3, which features Madeline Pryor after she was being imprisoned by the X-Men. If you're wondering about that, make sure you go read the Dark Web event, which also ties into the X-Men event. Again, you're now back to reading X-Men 1 through 25. Plus, if you're going to go read the Dark Web event to see how the Dark X-Men exist and what's going on, that is another 10-issue crossover involving Spider-Man. I'm giving you the full scope. This is what Marvel wants you to do to be able to understand Fall of X. And I also want you to know we're halfway through. Now, you got to read Wolverine, but you don't. Because Wolverine 36 to 40 is featured as his Fall of X, what he's doing. But all he is doing is being Wolverine and not doing things that involve the Fall of X. He's like Black Ops doing his own things and being like, yeah, because Orcus did this. And then doing Wolverine. But if you want to fully get what's going on, you will have to read 36 to 40. Why do you stop at 40? Because that starts the Sabretooth War, where Sabretooth has come across the multiverse with different Sabretooths and is going to try and finally kill Logan. And that is happening during the Fall of X. Now, how much is happening during the Fall of X? That remains to be seen, but it does conclude with Giant Sentinels showing up, which is a Fall of X plot. And if you want to know more about the Fall of X Sentinels, well, the best way to get into that one is to read Iron Man 1 through 18. And at this point, you might as well read all the X-Men. So, we've also got Astonishing Iceman. We got Cable. I didn't even read those two. They're on everybody's list of don't bother. Okay, so but they are a part of it. We got a Jean Grey book. Keep in mind, in Hellfire Gala, she died. So this is just like her introspectively like deciding what to do and what's going on, even though she's dead. We have X-Men Red. We have X-Men Unlimited. We have a spin-off of Uncanny Spider-Man known as X-Men Blue, which, to make it more fun, Uncanny Spider-Man is the Nightcrawler story where he pretends to be Spider-Man. Issues 1 through 4 is a complete kind of story with the finale being in issue 5. Why did I break it up that way? Because X-Men Blue Origins explains important plot details between 4 and 5 of that series. You also, to fully grasp what's going on, need to read Resurrection of Magneto, which one issue of that 4-issue series is really interesting unless you are a crazy Magneto fan. Issues 1 through 3 is basically Storm and Magneto looking back on their lives and deciding if they should be heroes or rulers or what they should do. Issue 4, Magneto comes out of the portal and he's like, am I a good guy? Am I a bad guy? I guess I'll be something in the middle. And then he kills like 20 people and I'm kind of like, I don't think that's in the middle, Magneto. I don't think that's in the middle, buddy. Now, if you've been reading all of this, you will be aware that this is actually ending multiple plots. This is not one big thing, okay? So what's going on is in the Fall of X, we are wrapping up every Krakoa major plot and making new ones like Uncanny Avengers and dealing with Iron Man. Now, Uncanny Avengers deals with the fallout of Captain Krakoa during the X-Men era, which you would get if you had read X-Men 1 through 25, which is why I said you're probably just going to have to read all 35 issues of the X-Men. Cyclops was seemingly dead at one point, and they made a power suit for him. That power suit, he went by the name Captain Krakoa. In Uncanny Avengers, that suit gets stolen. Turns out it's by Hydra Steve. We've brought back the evil version of Stevel. which they've now renamed to Grant so that he can, like, it's easier. It's Deadpool insists on calling him Stevel. I'm sticking with what Deadpool says. But anyway, so you're dealing with that. Like, that's being dealt with over there. Children of the Vault deals with a reoccurring plot point in which there's a vault in which people are moving at a faster pace, which is an old X-Men plot line, getting out of the vault conveniently during Fall of X. The main Fall of X plotline involves Orcus. They've basically taken the medicine that the X-Men have put out into the world, and they've poisoned it so that the X-Men look like they're poisoning humans, which in general sounds like a Fall of X plot, except that they have an AI that they're using, and that AI is going crazy. And I am a little unclear if there is that AI and there was the evil AI. They might be the one and the same AI, because I would like to think that they didn't have two evil AIs working against the X-Men at the exact same time. But there is another evil AI, or the same AI, known as Nimrod, who is then going to eventually turn into Bastion if you watched X-Men 97, so we have to deal with the Nimrod plot. On top of that, we are dealing with the remnants of the Sins of Sinister, which was a storyline that saw multiple alternate futures. So while we're dealing with Orcus, while we're dealing with Nimrod, while we're dealing with Tony Stark and Zong Wei, while we're dealing with Crafton Krakoa, we are also dealing with Sinister being in Professor X's head. He's in his head, and he's trying to take over Xavier's body, but Xavier's too strong for him. So they are trying to figure out which Sinister is going to win in the future, because apparently none of this matters. A Sinister is going to win in the future. So they're traveling to the future to figure out which one is the one where they win. This is all happening concurrently. In the middle of this, we're also dealing with other, like, outliers, such as Evil Beast. That's what Wolverine is fighting over there. We're also dealing with Dr. Doom having his own X-Man team, which was a cool sub-B plot, but they're showing back up for this as well. We're also dealing with a lot of the X-Men being captured, so that's a part of the Orcus plot. We also have double agents, triple agents, and all this crazy stuff going on. All of these plots are happening at the exact same time. And if you have been keeping up, if you've been reading everything that I have told you to read, you then have 3 more series to go through. You see, at this point in the story, they want you to jump into the rise of the powers of X, the fall of the House of X. Those two start up to start concluding these plot lines. Then we go into X-Men Forever, okay? Now, at this point, you're like, Benny, you're just rambling. You're telling us the story of what's going on in the Fall of X. And I am. That's exactly what I'm doing. Try reading all of this. I think it broke me. But anyway, I digress. I decided to read all of the Fall of X. Not with the intention of making a video, but at this point, I've been through so much hell, you're all going on the ride with me. Now, to do this, to read all of this and the parts that I'm missing, keeping in mind I have been buying some of them as they're coming out, to fill the gaps, cost me almost $300. To fill the gaps. I already had Wolverine, X-Force, stuff like Hellfire Gala. I already had the mainline X-Men book. Already had those. So it cost me about $300 to do this. And before we go to what the ultimate problem with the X-Men is, if you hadn't figured it out, I do want to say, after reading all of this, I was like, I need to decompress. I'm going to read a straightforward book known as Venom, which is confusing because it's a time travel plot, but at least it's one book. I was like, I can read one book and I don't have to go fill in a bunch of the gaps. So I started reading Venom, and Venom decided, and I was behind a little, and it was like 21, and now there's like 33 issues. Venom did the same shit. Venom went from 17 to 22 with one plot, and then at 23, we just had one random issue involving Black Widow. Then 24, 25 is the original plot. Then 26, 27, 28, 29 were the Black Widow plot again, for some reason. Then 30 was a recap, because it had been like 5 months since we did the time travel plot with Eddie. Then 31 was pushing that plot forward. But surprise, Carnage arrived. And do you want to know where Carnage is? Well, now you got to go read Carnage from 2023. So I had to go read 6 issues of Carnage to understand a crossover that meant nothing. And then I'm like, okay, I'm through the Carnage story. I'm through the Venom story. Time for me to read something else, like in the Venom plot, because issue 33 dropped. And you know what that one is? It's in freaking Blood Hunt. So if I want to understand what's going on with Blood Hunt, I now have to go read the rest of Blood Hunt. Luckily, I'm already reading Blood Hunt, but you get the frustration. Anyway, the problem with the X-Men is that this is not an outlier. That's the issue. See, since I have been kind of an outlier fan of X-Men, always assumed that what Krakoa is doing was obscure and weird. They don't normally do this because when I started getting into X-Men, that time they had decided to reduce the X-Men books to like 3, and they weren't focusing on them. 3 books was easy to follow. I could follow what's happening with the X-Men. We decided that we were going to turn this Fall of X series into a giant video. So you're going to get everything that has been deemed important for the Fall of X video, and it's going to be like 5 hours long. We're making that. And I thought, because we're doing these more recent videos where I literally give you the entire plot of Batman in 10 years, the entire plot of Superman in 10 years, and then the entire plot of Red Hood, why don't we do that for X-Men as a team? Let's go over all core things that have happened to the X-Men in the 30, 40 years that they have existed. Let's explain to people that think the X-Men aren't about civil rights and aren't dealing with racial prejudices and stuff like that. Let's explain to them how far back the X-Men go and what they're about. And this is not obscure. What was odd for the X-Men was the point where they only had 3 books going. You see, back in the 1970s and the 1980s when the X-Men started, they were not doing that well. Chris Claremont came in, and if you're an X-Men fan, you know that name. And if you're not an X-Men fan, Chris Claremont did every major story you always hear about. Phoenix, Dark Phoenix, the Weapon X stuff and all that crazy. Like, that was all the Chris Claremont era. He came up with the first idea of having multiple X-Men books and then crossing them over for a big event. He wanted to make it annual. There was an annual thing in which the X-Men events would be linked together. So I sat down with the writer and I said, okay, we are going to explain every X-Men event from the dawn of X-Men to now. We're going to talk about them all. We're going to say what happened in every single one of these. In my head, I'm thinking Fall of X, House of X, Battle of the Atom, House of M, like the big ones, Dark Phoenix Saga. There has been a yearly X-Men event since 1990. Yearly. And the core tenet of that is that it will involve every X-Men book. They will cross over. And it will be a big yearly annual event. We have 30 events that the writers are trying to explain right now, and it only spans 30 years. It's already turning into X-Men in the 90s explained, X-Men in the 2000s explained, X-Men in the 2010s explained. Then I decided to go deep dive into the X-Men comics. Does this work? Does the crossovers work? They do. They do so well. That's why Marvel wants you. I just spent $300 to catch up on the Fall of X. And whether or not you do, they don't care. Because I did. It's almost like the whale philosophy to gacha games and app games, where they don't need everyone spending a ton of money. They need like 3 guys spending a ton of money. And I feel like that's where the X-Men is. X-Men has steadily kept the same sales numbers in all of these years, with a couple spikes here and there when things like Jim Lee's X-Men and stuff like that were coming out. But overall, they've stayed relatively steady, or they've declined with the rest of the industry. This works. And what it really made me realize is that Marvel is just doing the same thing they did in the 80s. That Marvel and DC haven't updated how they sell you the books, how they market the books, how they publish the books, how they cross over. I remember all the way back at Secret Empire, Nick Spencer, I think it was Nick Spencer, the writer of Secret Empire, was asked, why are there so many crossovers for Secret Empire? And you can ask the same question for Blood Hunt right now, which is the current big event. Why are there so many? And his response was, it is proven to sell books. And it does. It works. Now, does that mean this is how it should be? No. I argue that Fall of X should just be a Fall of X book, and you give me 100 issues in a 1 through 100 order and have all this happen. Don't put it in other books. The argument that I get from super X-Men fans like Rob and Sal, from Rob from Comics Explained and Sal from Comic Pop, is that, it's meant so that you can read what you want to read. And you don't have to read the parts you don't have to read. And I get that philosophy. I do. But what about the guys who want to read all of it? And I'm not the only one. I know there's others out there. My brother was reading through Iron Man to make it work for our script, and he hasn't read the rest of Fall of X, so he wasn't sure what was going on. And his complaint is, as soon as I got to issue 8, 9, and 10, it was all over the place. Iron Man was showing up to an event going, hey, what's happening? They would tell him and he would leave. It felt disjointed. It didn't make any sense. I didn't like it at all. And I'm like, well, you'll understand it better when you read Fall of X. And he's like, that doesn't make it a good story. And I'm like, you're not wrong. I hated Fall of X because of what they were doing until I read everything. But that cost me $300+ because it only cost me $300 to fill in gaps. Could you imagine if I bought all of this from the get-go? And then what blows my mind about what Marvel's doing is then they don't promote the giant book, the book that has this organized. They don't promote that, and then they complain that they're not doing well in bookstores. I walked in yesterday, and I saw a bunch of X-Men books because the guys at the bookstore were like, we should put X-Men on promotion because of X-Men 97. I didn't know half of those had even come out. So that's it. The problem with the X-Men is Marvel. And it's not just the X-Men. They need to figure out what they're doing because if they keep up at this pace, they're just going to stay stagnated. Everyone likes to be comic books are dying, and I've proven multiple times that they're not. But you know what I haven't proven? They aren't growing. They've been at the same snails, which kind of like that, same snails numbers for a very long time. And that's the problem with Marvel. They're competing toe and toe with manga, but manga will surpass at the rate that they're going because manga has been growing in 5 to 10 years. Comics have been at the same why am I saying snails? Sales numbers since like the 90s. And I stand by my statement that I feel that the numbers went down in the 2000s, not because of everything that, all the idiots want to argue about, but because media consumption changed. Back in my day, I'd go buy a comic, go home and read it. Nowadays, people get half their shit by watching my videos or TikTok, even though I say on them all the time, go to your local comic book store. We're getting into a different topic. That's what I think the problem with the X-Men is. Loved X-Men 97. Fall of X is great if you read the whole thing. The video for the Fall of X is going to come out in probably about 2 or 3 weeks. We're working as fast as we can, but once we wrote down what we decided was important, there's a lot more than we thought, but we're getting it all in there. And yeah, check out my hot sauce. Also, if you like these kinds of videos where I do research and I explain things, check out Benny Has a Problem. I made a whole channel where I talk about things that are not comic related. Our current video that should be out right now is how the McDonald's method is what they do with your dead body. I will explain nothing else on this video because I want you to watch that one. We'll see you guys next time right here. Thank you.